Hi, welcome to Multimedia 255, MUL 255, our course on interaction design. In this course we're going to be primarily working with Flash and teaching you about the tool, and in addition we're going to be getting you into your first fully interactive project. The text that we're using this term is Adobe Flash CS4 Professional, the Classroom, and the Book. This training workbook is, I think, an interesting resource, and what I'm going to be doing is creating companions to it where I'd like to emphasize certain points, give you my extended notes. These little QuickTime movies and the PowerPoint slides that are attached are not a substitute for reading the course material or for completing the exercises. They are simply places where I want to add emphasis and maybe make some clarifications or indicate places where you need to pay attention as we move forward. This first chapter should not take you very long. It should take you less than an hour, and we'll have 3 of them in the first week to complete, and I'll give you the time estimates for each. Let's start at the very beginning, how to start Flash and open a Flash file. The easiest way to start Flash is to double-click on its icon in your file system. When you start Flash, you can then choose a file. You can go to the File menu and say File Open. There's a welcome screen that appears. It's in the upper right corner of this slide. You'll see something like this little splash screen, and in it you can open a file from it. And then down in the lower right, if you are browsing the file system, you will see both the SWF and the FLA files for projects, and you can double-click those and open them in Flash as well. Finally, the last way to open a Flash document is to drag it and drop it onto a Flash application icon. So there are many ways in, like there are with any other document type in your computer system. And I want to say a word about the difference between SWF files and FLA files. The main difference is that the SWF is the final published Flash document. In most cases it's not editable, and it's very difficult to retrieve, to decompile, or to retrieve the instructions that would form a Flash file from it. The FLA is an editable source document. It's where you'll manipulate all of the assets and objects to create the final experience for your users. I want to point out that it's very important to save the file that you're working with in the same file, the same folder where you'll have the assets for that project. In many of this book's lessons and in many Flash projects, FLA documents reference other asset files, and they have to be in the same folder as the Flash document or they will not be found. Let's talk a little bit about the Flash work area. There's a timeline, tools panel, stage, library panel, property inspector, and the edit bar above the stage. In this slide I've kind of got them laid out in a way that makes sense. Edit bar is up at the top there above the stage. Stage is a large white rectangle in this slide set, and it is the window that you'll be seeing the Flash movie play, and you'll see the results of your work, and it's also, you can add objects directly to this stage, take them on and move them off of the stage. The tool panel runs down the right side of the screen, and there you can are the tools for editing, marking, adding, modifying objects. The property inspector is a constantly open dialog box that talks about the currently selected object. In this case there's no object selected, so the panel is talking only about the Flash file itself, and it talks about which version of ActionScript is being used, what the uh, frames per second is, what the size of the image is, what the stage color is, all the properties that you would have for the file as a whole. If you would select a tool from the Tools panel, the Properties panel would change and give you the characteristics of that tool. If you selected an object on the stage, you would see in the Properties panel the characteristics of that object, and you could edit them there. If you select something on the timeline, select layers, you'll see the property panel change once again. You can undock and move these panels around to make a workspace that suits your work style. Some of you may be more left-handed or right-handed, or you might want to have the tool palette float or the timeline not be just right under the stage for whatever reason. I'd encourage you to experiment and find a style that works for you. This default you can always get back to. You can get back to it by choosing under the Window menu, click on Workspace, and then when that dialog expands, you can click on Essentials, and it will just simply restore the Flash work area back to this first state. If you have Adobe Creative Suite 4 installed, you'll notice that there are some similarities between other CS4 applications. The timeline is similar to the timeline in Premiere Pro or Adobe After Effects. Now the Property Inspector is similar to the one in Dreamweaver, and not too different from the one in Photoshop. The timeline is a very important and interesting tool. Let's talk first about layers that occur in the timeline. Layers overlap each other in the order in which they appear in the timeline. The top layer overlaps the bottom layers. So you can think about it as a layer as an invisible container. It's an invisible container with no thickness that you can stack a number of them on top of each other on the stage. And those layers contain the objects, like this picture in this case, or the background, that are displayed. If we reverse the photo 1 and the background, if we just drag the layers above and below each other, this wooden deck, the boardwalk, would cover up the photo. You'd see that right away. The interesting thing about layers is that you can make things appear in front of or behind objects. So in different layers they appear differently. So as you design your projects, you have to consider the stacking order of the layers and be aware of how those objects in different layers appear. The playhead is the little red rectangle that's around the number 1. It's static in this slide, but when you're in Flash, you'll be able to take that playhead and slide it back and forth. As you do, you'll be able to see the animation move. Because Flash will display the contents of the frame that's under the playhead at that time. And if you hide and show different layers, you'll be able to see the effects of those layers and see how they truly just appear to be on top of each other, a stack of paper on top of each other. The next thing I want to talk about the timeline is the concept of a frame. And a frame is a measure of time on the timeline. A keyframe is a kind of frame. A keyframe is represented on the timeline with a circle and indicates a change in contents on the stage. Keyframes are essential in animation. A keyframe indicates a change, whether it's in the position or other qualities of something on the stage or the beginning or end of an audio file. You're going to use keyframes in every Flash project, so it's important to understand the keyframe's purpose clearly. And then notice that there's a difference between inserting a keyframe and inserting a blank keyframe. When you insert a keyframe, the keyframe contains the frame's original contents until you change them. When you insert a blank keyframe, though, all of the contents are removed from the frame so that you can add new content. Let's talk about the Property Inspector. The property inspector changes depending on what's selected. It can display the properties for the entire document, a selected frame, a selection on the stage, or a selected tool in the Tools panel. It's a constant, open, changeable dialogue that is meant to give you feedback about where you are right now. The Tools panel that runs down the side of the default space I've taken here and torn off and turned into a floating menu. In this first layer you can see the selection tools. There's the black selection arrow, the sub-selection arrow. You can see in some of these that there's a tiny little triangle in the lower right corner. So the third tool of the selection menu is the free transform tool that's up right now. But below it, that little triangle indicates that there's something else, and under that is the gradient transform tool. In the next tool, the little circle, is the 3D rotation tool. Under that is the 3D translation tool. And then we've got the lasso for selecting objects. The next set of tools are drawing and type tools. There's the pen tool. Underneath the pen tool are the tools to add an anchor point or delete an anchor point or to convert an anchor point. There's the text tool, the line tool, and then there's the rectangle tool, the oval tool, the rectangle primitive tool, or the oval primitive tool, and the polystar tool. There's the pencil, there's the brush tool, and the spray, the airbrush tool, and then there's the deco tool. In the retouching group, you'll see that there's the bone tool and the bind tool. There's the paint bucket or fill, and then there's an ink bottle tool below that. There's the eyedropper for selecting colors and the eraser. In navigation tools, there's the hand and zoom. And then in the color area, there's the stroke color and the fill color. And then there's black and white or swap colors. And then the options area is the options that are available depend on the selected tool. The options change when you select different tools. So for example, when you select the rectangle tool, the object drawing mode icon appears. When you select the zoom tool, the enlarge and reduce icons are available. When you select the pencil tool, the pencil mode icons are available. And you can also find additional options for the selected tool in the property inspector. That's it for me for lesson